Well, welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Dan O'Brien. I'm a senior partner here at ActionCOACH in Central Texas. And today I have Sumanth Swaminathan here with me, who is the founder and CEO of Vironix Health. Very excited to be sitting down. This is going to be a phenomenal conversation of so many different things, from business and building a business and entrepreneurship to the technology and the things that are going on at Vironix Health. So very excited. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today. Sumanth, I'm going to hand it over to you for just a few minutes here. If you would just give us a little bit of your background and tell us what is Vironix Health.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Tanner, and thanks for having me, of course. My background, I'm a tech wonk, PhD in applied mathematics, postdoc, so PhD out of Northwestern, postdoc at Oxford. I studied mostly theoretical physics a lot of my life. And after doing industrial mathematics in industry for a few years, I got into the digital health space through the startup scene, now close to about 8 years back. So I've worked in government labs, big companies, small companies, academia, and I can tell you running and founding my companies is the best gig I've ever had by far. And it's easily the most stressful too. But it's a great scene. And so what do we do? I mean, we are in the digital health space. Vironix is a company that makes intelligent patient monitoring hardware and software. We're primarily a software company, but we partner with hardware companies to deliver essentially turnkey patient monitoring solutions for patients with some pretty serious conditions, COPD, heart failure, asthma. A lot of these folks, they have these uncured lung and heart conditions, as yet uncurable lung and heart conditions. And as they live with these sicknesses, they are constantly faced with flare-ups of their conditions, things like fluid accumulation in a heart failure patient's legs, or shortness of breath for an asthmatic. And generally, if these folks had a way of identifying these problems at home, catching them early, they would take some of their medications, they consult with their caregivers or their family to get on with their days. But the problem is that a lot of these really sick people are catching problems on day 8, 9, and 10 when they're in the hospital at tens of thousands of dollars a day sometimes, or something much worse. And so we build these patient monitoring systems that collect and interpret health information at home to help people to understand the early onset of sickness when they can do something about it. And these products are heavily AI enabled. So that's where that mathematician and physicist in me comes in. We've built a lot of very sophisticated models and also data structuring and gathering APIs, essentially cloud software that allows us to very efficiently grab all the right data that you need at home, and interpret it to really risk stratify people and understand, when they need help.
Beautiful. I absolutely love that. So for those that are in the audience and just kind of piecing this all together, are you primarily on the consumer side, the patient side, or is it more working through healthcare organizations and insurance companies and things like that in terms of being able to get the software and the technology out to the end user?
Yeah, great question. We're primarily what we call B2B. So we sell primarily to physicians, caregivers, and insurers. And the reason for that is that it's a rare moment in time in the US healthcare industry where a lot of these products can be made free for patients, and they're actually personalized to patients. But the way to do that is to go through certain aspects of the healthcare system. And so we go to providers meaning doctors in this case, and we say, look, you have a lot of patients who are sick. We can set up this patient monitoring technology for them, and it's completely paid for through established healthcare reimbursement codes. So insurers, primarily Medicare and Medicaid, are paying quite a lot for this technology. And why? Because it costs the health insurer a whole lot more money to pay for hospital bills than it does to pay a few $100 a month to make sure that these patients are safe at home and not going to the hospital, right? And so it's rare in healthcare where you see a win for every player in the system. When we go to market, patients get discounted or completely free personalized technology. Physicians get new sources of revenue to drive their own practices. And they also get improvement in the efficiency of their care. They get improved safety because obviously, particularly with the pandemic over the last 2 to 3 years, patients can, if they're infected, they can cause problems within hospital systems. And so physicians get new sources of revenue, better care for their patients, improved safety, improved efficiency. And of course, insurers, they pay a lot less in hospital bills, right? So, everybody wins. And it took some time, like 5 years back, even 5 years back, a lot of this didn't exist. There weren't the proper reimbursement mechanisms for patient monitoring, and patients themselves weren't as used to telehealth. COVID very aggressively forced adoption of telehealth within the United States and abroad. And so now a lot of patients aren't so uncomfortable with these technologies, because they had to during COVID. And then they realized, oh, wow, now that I've used this, I guess this is a whole lot better than waiting 45 minutes in doctor office number 1 and waiting another half hour in doctor office number 2, right? Or waiting an hour on the call, on the phone just to get an appointment, right? So having these sorts of early detection care provisions at home, it doesn't just save lives, it saves time, it saves family anxiety. These are really crucial value adds for people's healthcare journeys.
Oh man, that is so powerful, and it has been really cool to see, that aggressive transition and change that that really COVID had brought upon with telehealth and things like that, and how it is different today than it was even 3-4 years ago. And I'm curious, so just looking at patient monitoring and kind of this preventive care side of things, and the advent of more technology in this space, when it's provided by caregivers as kind of the primary source of how patients can get access to this, is it, or does it have the ability to provide live data to the doctors and the caregivers out there, so that there's like true live stream monitoring, things like that? Is that change the game in terms of what that doctor patient relationship looks like long term?
Absolutely. Some doctors will want sort of more live data, and they're sort of much more aggressively managing patients in real time. And some physicians will actually be more on the treatment side, and they'll come to companies like us to even do the triage-like monitoring. But regardless of what's going on, knowing the natural history progression of disease, it just completely changes your options for treating it. That is, live streaming. And, imagine, you go to the doctor's office, you take your weight. Okay, if you're a heart failure patient and you've gained weight, let's say 4 pounds in 2 days, that could mean that you're having very serious fluid accumulation. That could be a problem. Okay. Now, imagine the doctor, though, can see how your weight's been fluctuating really over the last week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, right? His or her ability to interpret how severe your fluctuation weight is dramatically improved, because he or she can see what's actually happening with you. The truth is that patient could have gained 4 pounds because they ate a bunch of salt at lunch, and then they also drank a bunch afterward. And there's this sort of imbalance in their system that's causing different types of fluid accumulation, either in their stomach or in their legs. It could just be that they ate badly one day, or by the way, there's a host of other things. Or they're on a normal diuretic to control their fluid intake, and this particular day they didn't adhere to their medication. A big problem in healthcare is patient adherence to medication. But when you can actually see like the temporal trend of people's symptoms, of their vital signs, of their complaints, of when they're calling in, your understanding of the patient is just so dramatically improved. And we're not talking about a doctor doing hours of research on this patient. It's opening up the Vironix software to a page where basically the entire patient history is summarized, and the AI is firing to interpret that in real time, giving them risk scores, giving them an interpretation of when these dips actually happen and how many times it's happened in the past, telling them what data that was measured by the patient is bogus and what data isn't bogus. Right? All of it's sitting there. A caregiver can just open this up. And by the way, just for doing this, they're going to get paid. The healthcare system is now paying the doctors. And what could be better? The fee-for-service system in the past has paid people to do operations, to treat. That means the incentive is for people to be sick. so that you can do more operations and treatment. But now preventative care is actually being paid for. And that really is where things should be. You should be
Mm.
paying physicians so that the nuclear episode doesn't happen. You should be, there should be much more money in the system for preventative care. And it really has happened quite a lot more. Again, since COVID and since a lot of the patient monitoring CPT codes got established, we really started in 2017, and came into some maturity in 2019. And there's in 2022, there were even new reimbursement codes for what's called remote therapeutic monitoring for principal and chronic care management. There's more and more funding going on for let's actually keep people healthy, not, let's deal with them after they're already super sick and our options are few and their care is really expensive.
Mm. And this gets me so excited. I was actually just listening to a podcast this morning, and they were talking about preventative care and how, one of the biggest challenges is that, was it like a traditional clinician has to see a patient every 12 minutes, something like that, where, being able to establish really understanding and provide better insights to a patient is much more challenging in that, until you start looking at how do you aggregate data that is so much more depth than what they had access to before. I'm like, my head's spinning on a whole bunch of different things. This is just like a super cool space. I want to take a step back if we can and just kind of talk about your journey into really down this path. I'd love to kind of dive into the decision to found a company. But even just going this path, knowing the background that you have, tell us a little bit more about how you got into, this piece of it. How do we get into kind of the health technology side of things? Why was that important to you as you continued on your journey?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. For me, that came later in life. I didn't encounter healthcare until about 8 years back when I got into the digital health space. So I was doing industrial mathematics for a DuPont-like company called Gore, helping them to accelerate innovation of like materials of what are called fluoropolymers. If you've ever skied Gore-Tex jackets, Gore-Tex pants, this is what these guys make. By the way, they're amazing. So I was just skiing this past weekend, by the way. My Gore-Tex pants are one of the great purchases of my life. And so they're a fluoropolymer that basically helps keep water, they're waterproof. They help people when they're hiking or they're skiing to stay dry, but they also breathe because they're highly hydrophobic. So when you sweat, the vapor comes off your body, it doesn't condense on your own body. So you're comfortable when you're out there. It's amazing. But anyway, I was doing industrial mathematics, mostly small scale physics. The data science revolution sort of hit now close to about a decade back. And I got wound up, sort of caught up in this space as well, learning a lot of new empirical modeling methods, machine learning, both supervised and unsupervised. And then I'd been in the big company scene. I really wanted to go to a smaller company. And so I did this fellowship in New York City called the Data Incubator, and I was hired by a startup as the chief data scientist out of that. And that's when I encountered sort of the startup scene. I've been in a government lab, as I mentioned, in academia in a big company, and the startup scene, it demands a lot of you. You have to wear a lot of different hats. But I found that what I was doing was so much closer, so much more impactful personally. Things were moving quickly. My work was immediately being put out there for customers and or technicians to see. And it was really then when I got very deeply into healthcare. That company was building sort of a patient registry platform for understanding mostly respiratory disease patients. So I was shadowing physicians, meeting patients, seeing just how broken so many aspects of the US healthcare system are, but also how many opportunities there were for technology and automation to improve what was going on. The inefficiencies in the way patients come in and their history is collected, the lack of knowledge that many clinicians had about the past of patients and how easily accessible that could be if you just automated certain data capture methods. And so I read more clinical literature than you can imagine. I saw a lot of patients, very unfortunate circumstances, met lots of physicians. And essentially, it's when I sort of realized I had a core skill that could be connected with one of the biggest problems out there. And I gained a lot of experience where I thought I could actually make a difference.
Hmm.
And so it was through that startup scene that I learned about startups, about funding, about fundraising, about also just about how to execute lean operations. I built Vironix during COVID, actually, because we had all this experience in preventative care of lung and heart conditions. And COVID hit, of course, it was causing this massive like global problem, right? People were trapped in their homes. So we're like, why can't we build some algorithms to help people identify the early onsets of COVID? We were doing this for other diseases, right? The problem is there's no data out at that time on COVID. So we had to build all these new technology. I have relationships at Oxford University. I'm an advisory board member in their math department. I still take students there. So I supervise their theses. And so I did some work. I contacted a physician colleague, Dr. Wysham, who's also Nick Wysham. He's also a co-founder of this company, Dr. Chris Landon. I got my other two co-founders together, Boutros Toro, boy prodigy, this great tech guy, and Shira Ramanathan, another amazing tech guy. And we were like, let's just get started. Let's see if we can build some models that will work on this. We got it validated at Oxford, and then we started building a whole new tech stack. And then that technology basically ended up being more robust than anything I'd ever built in the past for any other conditions. So that's when we started the whole thing, talking to our network. We raised a pre-seed round to get a few $100K in so we could do some product development and validation. And then that had some good promise. We got some early customers in form of MOUs, raised a seed round. We've closed now over $2 million to date. The company has early customer adopters in place. We've got peer-reviewed literature. We've got over 250 investors and really knowledgeable investors too, health tech folks, deep tech folks, physicians, lots of physicians have invested. And so, yeah, it's quite a journey that it's been. But like I said, stressful, a lot of hard work, but the best gig I've ever had.
Oh man, that is beautiful, and I appreciate you kind of sharing that road that you've been on. And with being most of our viewers are entrepreneurs, some of them founders creating startups, others being in business for a number of years. I'm curious for you on the business side of things. So taking out just the product and the service and the technology and things like that, but just building the business itself. What were some of the areas that you learned the most or had to learn the most as you kind of went on the business journey side of this?
Yeah, the biggest thing on that side is understanding the decision-making processes in healthcare. So really who has the ability to turn a key, but also understanding how convoluted and complex reimbursement mechanisms are, right? And now, I gave you one reimbursement mechanism before, right? That said health insurers are paying for these products, and they are, but there's also what are called value-based healthcare plans now, where health insurers will actually give bonuses to physicians if they lower costs for their patients.
Hmm.
Okay. And so the tricky thing with getting in to healthcare, there's generally five major players, right? There's pharma, there's health insurance, there's providers, there's patients themselves, and then there's now tech, like wearables, other sort of people involved. And the question you always have to ask yourself is, how do I make do the best by the patient? How do I actually improve health the most? But, it has to be paid for, right? Patients, while some patients will pay for wearables and such, and generally historically, we have an insurance system. Patients don't directly pay for their healthcare, right? I'm sure you don't pay directly for your healthcare. You pay co-pays, but you have insurance, right?
Right.
Well, but insurers are also a tricky boat to get through. There's lots of insurers in this country. We're not a single payer country like many of the other countries in the world. And so they all have their own bureaucracies and processes. Doctors, they want to do right by patients, but they have to earn a living too. They have to get paid, right? So the thing in healthcare is you need to build something that meets the intersection of what will a patient and physician use, what will be paid for so that somebody's going to win financially in the system, and then what's actually going to improve health, right? If you can get something that improves health, that generates enough revenue to satisfy the economic interests of the system and has a chance of being adopted, if you get all three of those right, then you've got a shot. And so a lot of what I learned in the business of healthcare is just like, who the stakeholders are, which of these 5 entities are the most easiest or difficult to navigate. And I've done pilots with all of them, by the way, in different companies at this point. So I know quite a bit about doing business with all of these entities. But you've got to build technology that is simple, usable, works, is clinically validated, and gets through regulatory. Okay, that's on the tech side. But you've got to get something that makes enough money, to be honest, for the players in the system, so that it gets out there. You really have to get all 3 of those things right. If you miss one, the chance of it actually getting used is heavily diminished. And so, for example, that's why I told you about 5 years back, doing the exact same thing I'm doing now, the exact same product. The likelihood of it getting adopted 5 years back, 4 years back, even 3 years back would have been dramatically less. There wasn't already a climate of telehealth adoption, remote care, patient care adoption, but there also wasn't the same reimbursement mechanisms in place, both through codes as well as value-based care contracts. And so timing is just so critical. And I'm sure you've heard this from other entrepreneurs as well. Timing in business is so important. I mean, you can look, there was tons of telehealth companies who were around for 2 decades prior to COVID, and most of them were folding shop. And then, it's not like they had the miracle business acumen of knowing that a pandemic would hit in 2020, right? So
Yeah,
it's not like, there's some sort of inherent genius that gets to this. There's one of the biggest things a good entrepreneur does is they fail quickly and cheaply, and they react to adversity with a very critical mind. So as things happen that they can't control, they intelligently pivot, right? It's not about being right all the time or having a magic ball. And there's this illusion about how that works in business. I must say, I mean, to speak frankly, I think it's a lot of nonsense. Most of the best entrepreneurs I met are good entrepreneurs because they're lean, they're very good critical thinkers. They know how to take intelligent bets, fail quickly, spend capital sort of in the right spots, and of course, get the best people in the world behind them.
Powerful words.
Yeah.
Absolutely powerful.
We'll fail a lot. I mean, I can't tell you how much I have failed. It's more uncomfortable than rather it's not uncomfortable, but it's a lot. All of us have failed quite a lot. But this company, we've done right by our investors as we've failed. We've raised and we've prudently deployed their capital, and we've accomplished a lot with very little, which is why investors continue to put money into our pockets.
Love it. It's absolutely fascinating to kind of break down the areas of how to build a business, especially in the healthcare system, and the different stakeholders involved, and the timing of these things together. I mean, it's very fascinating. If I had not taken the time to think about that in the past, and I'm sure that there are others that will see this that hadn't thought about that before either. And very fascinating, very, I think, timely in terms of how we understand the context of building business and putting the critical mind forward in building. Well, I do want to be respectful of time. I'm realizing here that we are probably a little bit over the 20-minute mark. And I'd love to just kind of keep chatting and going through things, but I do want to be respectful of time. So as we kind of start to wrap up, I always like to end on one specific question. But before I shift over to that, for those that want to find out a little bit more, follow the progress of what y'all are doing, want to connect with you specifically, anything like that, where can folks go to find out more information?
Oh, well, our website, Vironix.ai, has a lot of great information on us, our company, and what we've done. But our LinkedIn page is the best place to also see events. We just presented at South by Southwest a couple of weeks back, and we've been having these. As I mentioned, we raised a great seed round. We're doing some work overseas in the UAE and in India. So take a look at our LinkedIn page. Just search for Vironix on LinkedIn, and please follow us there. Follow us on Twitter as well. You'll really see a lot of the progress we're making, the tech we're making, and our research. We're a deeply scientifically minded company. It's in our core to our DNA, so we publish a lot of our work. And we still take students, as I mentioned, co-supervised theses and continue to advance the front edge of research.
Beautiful. And for all you listening, check out the description here in the video below because there will be these links. Go connect, follow, all of that fun stuff. Check out this research, check out the information that's coming out because this is truly fascinating. And personally, I am super excited to see how uh, just really this healthcare industry changes over the next several years as technologies continue to be adopted and things continue to move forward. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all the work that y'all are doing in creating all of this. Because I can see how much impact this can have long term. So, that all said, Samantha, what is most inspiring to you today?
Oh, well, I would say that um, I'm a technology person, and what really excites me and what inspires me to continue to move forward is just seeing the rate and the breadth of technology that is really taking hold within healthcare in particular. It makes me think that there's so many ways to potentially make people or help to make people better, right? There's government policy, there's spending. I'm a firm believer there's therapies and drugs. Um, and I truly believe that tech has the ability to really improve quality of life, disease management all around the world. And it's a rare time in the sense that I think technology now is going to make a bigger impact than ever before. And that's what keeps me moving, by the way. I mean, I truly believe that technology, our ability to build tech, the stuff that we're doing is going to completely change everything about healthcare. And I'm very excited to see it happen.
That is truly inspiring. Thank you. I appreciate it. Sumanth, thank you so much for taking the time to sit here, chat with me today, share a bit of your story, your background, and all of the amazing things that are going on with Vironix and everything that y'all are building. So thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it. It's truly been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tanner. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving us some time.